What's up, legends? Roachsaurus here, and today we're going to be reacting to another One Peg video update on Iron Mace are in some real trouble. Dark and darker news. Let's take a look. Let's go!
Good morning, everyone. My name is One Peg, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the Iron Mace versus Nexon case. I know that you guys are loving these videos, so thank you very much for coming and checking them out. If you do find this interesting, I would ask that you please consider subbing the channel. However, in today's video, we're going to talk about how if Iron Mace is unable to push this game to early access in the next 20 or so days, including today, we will likely not see Dark and Darker coming to light within the next 6 months to calendar year or more. And I will explain why. Rajesh. Now, King Rajesh is a self-appointed attorney. Obviously, there's no credentialing or anything. We can't really just check up on them and make sure that they're actually an attorney, but according to them, they are an attorney. Now, they do say that they're not an IP litigator in the course of this thread and other associated threads, but they are somebody that has been following the case because they found this to be interesting. And I found the reading in this thread to be incredibly interesting. So, and also, hey man, thank you for giving me a little, you know, in the thread. I appreciate you, buddy. Anyway, you guys might remember me from my previous post. In this previous post, he goes into talking about Darker and Darker's early access is being delayed and why, but we're going to get to that in a second. He says, I usually like to parse out a judge's orders to kind of read the tea leaves to see where the wind is blowing. Usually you wouldn't like to see a judicial order liberally quoting from one party's papers in this case. But again, this was an ex parte motion, meaning that the other party hasn't been able to have a say yet. So the motion that was being filed was done so without the other party being involved in it. The entire idea of a judge quoting only one party and not the other is kind of weird, but in this case, it's not, I guess. He also talks about how in Rio, because the judge, the magistrate judge, and if you guys want to see documentation, obviously there's a Patreon at patreon.com/real_onepeg. For $3, you can see all of my notes and the history of the case and all of the PACER documentation and the documentation that I've been sent directly from different attorneys and whatnot. Anyway, he talks about how the court magistrate cited something from a case called Rio, which is Rio Props versus Rio International Interlink. And this is about how internationally serving people and extenuating circumstances and why you would need to go through such lengths. The magistrate ended up talking about how saying the court's intervention was necessary due to plaintiff's inability to serve an elusive international defendant striving to evade service of process. Now, he goes on to say that Nexon didn't actually accuse Iron Mace of trying to be evasive. However, the magistrate seemed to bring that in anyway and said or insinuated that Iron Mace was being evasive. Not that it really matters, though, because the court magistrate that signed this is not going to be the assigned judge in the case that would be heard.
Why would the Rio court say that they were being evasive? That's kind of weird.
Once Iron Mace actually responds to the summons that they've now been sent. So he goes on to say, that being said, I would imagine Nexon will have served Iron Mace through the various means and will file a certification of service within days, if not within a few hours. Meaning that they're, as soon as they had that order in hand, they're going to send off all the emails and direct messages through Discord and direct messages through Twitter to say, you have been served. And we are going to be able to validate you being served because we know that these are all valid and real and good. And whether you say that you've been served by them and acknowledge this or not, we're going to file with the court that we did what we were supposed to do, which begins a 21-day timer.
Yeah, and this is the fast track that Nexon got approved for in the court system, I do believe. So yeah, they're already getting ready to hand out those documents, or they already have at this point.
Now, for those of you that haven't been following along, the way that it works is if you've been summoned to court, once you've been served with those papers that satisfies the court's rules on all of that stuff, you have 21 days to respond and or appear, which means that their attorney. And if you notice here, this will do three things. It will start the 21-day clock for Iron Mace to appear via counsel and fire either an answer or a motion to dismiss, and it will cause an Article 3 district court judge to be assigned, and it will start to cause Iron Mace to start shelling out hefty legal fees for an MTD or motion to dismiss. So prior to something like this ending up in an actual full-on trial, what the defense will try to do is file for a motion to dismiss, meaning they want to try to convince the judge to throw the whole thing out based on trying to say that Nexon's case has no merit. Now, whether or not that ends up occurring, we don't really know. I would assume, though, if Nexon is going after this as heavily and as hard as they are and hiring the firm that they have, and actually, and I agree with the take that King Rajesh makes further down in this thread, where he talks about how you don't hire a firm like the one that Nexon has. The firm that Nexon has hired is a firm that goes by the name of Arnold and Porter. And Nexon has its own staffed in-house attorneys that internationally, United States, in Korea, and otherwise, where they would look at the merits of their own case internally, decide whether or not it would be okay or prudent enough to shell out the amount of money that they have to an outside attorney to pursue the case that they did. Secondarily to that, the folks at Arnold and Porter, who are, from what I have seen, what I gather, is one of like the top 5 litigating firms probably in the world that would litigate IP law like this. Arnold and Porter, as a large, very large, mega corporate, bougie, super firm, would look at this and scrutinize the merits of this case themselves before they decided whether or not they were going to take the case on, because they wouldn't want to take on something frivolous in order for it to potentially tarnish their name. If that makes sense.
Right.
So they're going to be looking at this, trying to consider whether,
just like if you hire a lawyer and they usually look at your case and say, well, they kind of make a decision whether or not you're going to win or lose and how much money they're going to get out of it, determining whether or not they're going to represent you in a court of law.
Whether or not taking it and pursuing it would make them look bad or not. And in them taking it, assuming that they're going to go after this, them assuming that and saying, yes, we will be your attorney, actually speaks pretty loudly, unfortunately. Since IM now has to appear and will file a motion to dismiss within 21 days, I would predict that early access for this game will not happen unless IM wins this lawsuit, either by a motion to dismiss, summary judgment, or at trial. The status quo has now been established, and anything that IM does to change that status quo, i.e. releasing Dark and Darker for any purpose, will be held against them in the lawsuit and likely result in hefty sanctions.
Oh, my.
So 2 things are going to happen. Well, possibly a third. The first is when they go for this motion to dismiss in court, they will either have the motion ready to roll or they will seek an extension on getting the motion to dismiss together that they believe would be good enough to submit to the court. So that could be 30, 60 days, something like that. The second thing that will likely end up happening is the moment that everybody gets into court, Nexon will try to file for a temporary injunction, meaning that they want the court to kind of put a stake in the ground and say, you may not move past this point to Iron Mace, meaning you cannot monetize this, you cannot move this game to early access, which is what they are referring to. In this case, Rajesh is referring to by saying status quo. The idea here is that you want to keep a snapshot of whatever is going on with the game, and in this case, exactly the same way as it is through the entire duration of the case. Now, remember, in the last video, I mentioned that Nexon's entire take here, and the reason
oh wow. If this happens, that means we are not going to see any like early access, obviously, like he said. We're not going to see any like updates of the game coming out anytime soon. No more betas, nothing like that until this gets resolved in court. Because like you said, they want to keep everything exactly the same in the snapshot of the current state of the game during this whole lawsuit right here, which, oh man, that puts a damper on Iron Mace completely.
why they're pushing as hard as they are is because they're trying to prevent Iron Mace from going to early access. Because I said it would change how the case would be handled. The moment that Nexon is able to serve Iron Mace, it creates a snapshot in time that says, okay, this is what we are talking about. This is what we're litigating. If they weren't able to serve them because of the Hague Convention taking somewhere between 4 to 6 months, and Iron Mace was able to push this to early access by basically saying, well, we weren't served, so if they were able to do that, if they had been able to do that, they would have had a marketed product. The product would have already been established. There would have been monetization of that product. And with the product already out in market, that would have been the snapshot. The game already would have been in everyone's hands, and we all would have been playing it all.
Which is why Nexon requested fast tracking this case to court as soon as possible, so they could prevent Iron Mace from doing this.
Already. Nexon's trying to prevent that by saying, well, prior to them going to early access, we can stop this from happening. They can't monetize it. To think of this another way, let's say that I have the world's greatest formulaic cup of coffee right here in my hand. and I employed 2 or 3 other people that worked for me to develop this perfect cup of coffee. If the 3 people that were working for me decided they didn't like me anymore, and prior to me being able to actually market my now R&D'd up perfect cup of coffee, they decided to take the formula leave and market it themselves, creating a second brand. Now I go to sue them, but in the process of that, I don't file that injunction. They could take my formulaic perfect cup of coffee, put it out to market, and in the process of this legal battle taking place over the course of 6 months, a year, maybe more, maybe this is the greatest cup of coffee that has ever existed, and the sales end up reflecting that. They make hundreds of millions of dollars off of my coffee formula. Now, in that process, that gives them the ability to mount their legal defense. It potentially ends up bogging me down,
Yep.
and it gives them fuel to be able to fight this thing through court. Now, me being self-serving in one side.
I mean, that's a smart move by Nexon. It really is. It really is. They know what they're doing. Unfortunately, it's not good for Iron Mace in this state.
I obviously do not want that to be able to happen, so I file an injunction to make sure that they can't profit off of my formula while we figure all of this out. Make sense? So the unfortunate reality here is that the snapshot, this actual picture, the status quo that gets established the moment that they actually appear in court, which means that the injunction that these people will be trying to which means that the injunction that Nexon is seeking will end up being filed or attempted to be filed when they appear. This also means that within, like I said, the next 20 days, Iron Mace would have to push this to an early access state before they were to appear in court, even if it's just for the first time, because it's very likely that the firm Arnold and Porter that is representing Nexon already has this temporary relief order drafted and ready to go. But let's say that the temporary relief order, the injunction, ends up being filed, and Iron Mace just says, the hell with it, we don't care, and they thumb their nose at it, and they decide that they're going forward anyway. What happens then? Well, in those cases, the judge can implement what are known as sanctions, and the judge more or less gets full discretion in terms of whatever those sanctions are. Sometimes it's fines and legal fees, and other times, they can just award the case to Nexon and tell Iron Mace to go pound salt. I'm not kidding. They've done that in the past. Now, that being said, those are the things that Iron Mace is up against and the things that Nexon are going to try to argue. It could also be argued that the status quo could also come down to the schedule that Iron Mace has already pre-established. Remember, in Nexon's statement, they ended up citing tweets and whatnot from folks at Iron Mace saying that they intended to release the game in an early access state by about this time this year with a full release by year end. So it could be argued that the quote-unquote status quo would be to go along with the schedule that Iron Mace has already pre-established for themselves. Okay, now I'm not an attorney, and I'm not trying to be one, right? We all can agree. I'm just somebody that finds this stuff to be interesting. I'm trying to spread the good word, and I'm just trying to break this down into palatable bites. But that being said, I do foresee a couple of things if I was going to venture a guess based on everything that I've seen here. The likely scenario is that when Iron Mace shows up in court finally within the next 20 days, and I don't know whether they're going to be able to push to an early access state prior to then. If I were them and I was scraping or trying to get together some cash, I probably would try to knock this thing in as quickly as I can before my attorneys end up showing up at court, but that could end up damning my case. So they really got to weigh the pros and cons here. At the same time, when my attorney shows up to court in the next 20 days or so, I would assume that Iron Mace will end up filing an extension for their motion to dismiss. They will probably end up trying to get an extra 30 or 60 days. They're going to put a team of people on it, and that's going to cost somewhere around 6 figures. Or Iron Mace just does a fucking walk away. I don't know. At the same time, Nexon, when they arrive in court, their attorneys are going to end up trying to file a preliminary injunction. Something that basically says, or the court would order, that Iron Mace, Dark and Darker, can't do anything until after the court case has been decided. Now, obviously, the folks at Iron Mace are going to try to fight that. This is our only IP. This is the game that we've been making. This is what we're passionate about. We're trying to get this out into the market. Nexon's big and bad and burly, and they're just arguing about nomenclature. They're not really trying to protect anything. What trade secrets? They haven't proven that we have source code. You know, all of those arguments obviously are going to come into play. However, in the case of trade secrets laws, what I have seen from other people that have been talking about this, and unfortunately I can't find the journal article right now, but when it comes to trade secrets and injunctions, preliminary injunctions like this, another attorney written up in one of these other Reddit threads mentioned that trade secrets injunctions like these are granted upwards of like 80% of the time in United States courts. So it's very, very likely Iron Mace's feet will be cemented to the floor until after this case has been decided.
Oh my god, that's not good news at all, man. So either they're gonna have to whip up, they're gonna really have to, like he said, weigh out the pros and cons of this and decide what they're gonna do, if they're gonna hurry and get like an early access out and maybe damage their case by doing so, or hold off and just ground everything until this is all over. This might really push back the game for us. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think the Iron Mace should do in this position.
Now, of course, they have the ability to ignore all of that, but in doing so, they end up risking everything, depending on how and whether or not the judge decides that they want to be scrutinizing or if they want to play ball like they have in the past with companies like eBay, Apple, and Samsung. We'll have to see. Anyway, guys, that's what I have for this one. Thanks so much for coming and checking it out. If you would be so kind as to follow me on my socials, at OnePegMG on Twitter, at OnePeg on TikTok. And as always, I stream every day at twitch.tv/OnePeg. And if you would be kind enough to sub the channel here, I would forever be appreciative. Thank you so much for coming and checking it out. Sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but I do love you all. And I will see you in the next one.
Honestly, don't know what Iron Mace should do in this position because, again, I'm not an attorney either or any sort of legal person representation. I honestly don't even know what I would do in this position. I would probably just ground myself and hold off until this court case was over, honestly. But again, let me know down in the comments what you guys think the Iron Mace should do, and maybe if they should they risk it all and get an early access out ahead of time before the 21 days is up, or should they ground themselves as well and wait until this is over and see kind of where this allows them to be. Either way, it doesn't look like we're going to be getting something anytime soon. Hey guys, if you like the video, make sure you head over to the page, hit that like button, scroll over, smash that subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get notified for future video drops, and I will see you guys on the next one. Thanks for watching.